So this is us. And what I want to try and do is do something a little bit different than we've done before. So if you look at all the talks, amazing speakers and brilliant talks. But we're doing really well as a community. The Node community has achieved an awful lot over the last few years. And we now are a very powerful community. And with that power, there comes a bit of responsibility to do things the right way and in a grown-up way. And I want to chat about some of the great things that are happening in the community and some of the challenges we probably need to overcome. And one of the big things I wanted to do was give you an idea of different challenges facing different types of people and understanding that, you know, we have to actually tackle these challenges in different ways. So I got with me, I've got Ahmad. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Ahmad Nassri. I'm the chief architect at TELUS Digital. We run all the customer-facing technologies and software platforms that enable our business. And for those who don't know, our business is, you know, we're a telecom in Canada. So we have everything from modern way of building software all the way to, you know, how we joke about having COBOL in the back room somewhere. I've seen that. We do have it. It's still running in the infrastructure. And aside from my day-to-day job, I contribute a lot to open source, and I'm part of the Node Foundation user feedback group, and I kind of chair the enterprise user feedback initiative, trying to get in touch with big businesses and big companies and big teams and seeing how they can bring in some contribution back into the project and help not just support in kind of these type of activities, but also help actually contribute directly to the code and to the project itself.
Cool. And also Gordon Suttie.
Hi, everybody. Gordon Suttie. I'm a director in EY, or Ernst & Young. I work in the advisory business, so a management consultant. But my background is one of working with product development teams. And that's the role I specifically play in client engagements. Working with a wide variety of clients. I'm based in Dubai currently, so working with a lot of government entities on their digital transformation. And I have a dual role. Through some of those engagements, I'm also looking at the future of the professions, the future of the management consulting profession, and how that's evolving. So that will be part of what we're talking about today as well. How that actually becomes a digital offering in its own right.
Brilliant. And I suppose it's important to talk about, you know, in terms of the good that's going on at the moment, the reason that we're doing so well is because of the problems that these folks deal with, right? So when you're in a small, trendy startup and you've got like approximately 3.5 users, it's really easy to use cool tech and easy tech, right? Okay? And, you know, when we talk about enterprise, we talk about enterprise using technology to deliver their services. And when, you know, you're in TELUS and EY, I think you're talking about 1 million users out of the box, right? It's massive scale, yeah? And we also, there's a level of complexity that is huge. Like there's an average enterprise has something like 500 software systems that run just to help them run the company internally, right? So it's not just the outward-facing consumer sites. There's an awful lot of complexity, and an awful lot of it is delivered using software. Software is enabling success in enterprise massively. And they've realized that it's kind of broken. You know, the old ways just weren't working. It was just slowing everything down. And they're transforming. That's digital transformation. And digital transformation is a big word in TELUS, isn't it?
It is. We kind of started off a few years ago in creating the team, and we made a point of not doing a separate labs or a separate digital organization as a lot of companies do. We are part of the organization. We're the same company, and you see this in a lot of other places where they make a lab and they go to the hipster part of town and have pool tables and all this sort of fun things, but talk about the fake aspects of culture as opposed to the real things that do have real impact on day-to-day stuff, which is like the software parts and how to actually impact the cultural change within an organization. So yeah, I mean, we talk about digital transformation. Our context is we have a 100-year-old business and we're trying to transform it to a modern way of building software.
Yeah, echo that as well. I think for EY, we never created an EY digital. Digital is in everything that we do. It's a mega trend as defined in the Fourth Industrial Revolution in the World Economic Forum. That's the way that we look at it as well. It would be nice to have some of those pool tables and stuff in our office.
They're too loud.
But it is that scale that we don't realize. And maybe just to get an idea of kind of who, I don't know, how many devs are kind of
So yeah,
TELUS?
just for, like I always ask this question, especially when I talk about the context of enterprise and how the open source contribution works. Like, so my organization, I lead 500 people, 500 technologists across all functions and all parts of the software. Our community of practice is around 2,000 to 3,000 software developers across the rest of the organization. The business is about tens of thousands of people. I don't even know, like 20, no, sorry. I think it's close to 80 to 100,000, employees in the company. So it's interesting to hear, like, I don't know, how many people here work in companies that are like 20 people or less? Show of hands.
Yeah, this could
All
be,
right.
okay, yeah.
How about between 100 to 200? Okay, a few more hands. Anybody more than 500 people in their company? Oh, good.
Excellent.
So you know all my pains then. So this is part of the challenge. A lot of the time when we talk about the open source and the technologies that we use with, there's a lot of, 10, 20 size teams that, are solving problems and addressing problems on a daily basis that are completely different than the problems that, the 500 plus teams are facing every day. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I suppose the big thing is this idea of putting user first, right? That's the big change that actually is the real change behind all this digital transformation.
Yeah, I mean, again, in the context of the scale of the team, when you're a 20-person team, you have your own startup business, you're facing your users every day, it's easy to say, of course, the user comes first. But when you're tens of thousands of people or working in an enterprise scale, your users are so far removed from you that having this mantra of we got to work for the customer and the customer comes first is really important to repeat. And I think it surfaces itself really in the context of technology and software in particular. When we talk about performance, when you talk about quality of software, and talk about the user experience, those things get lost in big companies, not because people don't want to do them, just because the customer is so far removed. I mean, I don't know for EI, how's that any different? Because you're also dealing with not just your customer is also the barrier between you and the actual end user.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's always been the client first. And that's a transition that as the client themselves are putting the user first, that's been the catalyst for us. So the method of us working with our clients is changed dramatically. As you're working on a digital transformation and you're thinking about the user, then as an advisor, you're expected to come in and advise, not learn together.
Yeah. And that's a dual role for you, right? So
it's a dual role.
When you talk about building IP for EY, which you're involved in, that's putting your user first in that context is very different than as your role as advisory, where you're trying to teach companies how to put the users first.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a different prospect, is it?
Yeah, it is. I think for an organization, then we're obviously having to go through that journey ourselves. Yeah. It's a culture shift in our organization, acting in that way. It's a different dynamic with the client. So yeah, how we then achieve that is then the big question. How do we start acting like a lean startup in an organization with over 250,000 people? It's an interesting challenge.
How has that surfaced in the day-to-day part of software teams kind of work? Because for us, for example, I'll give an anecdote. We started noticing that the marketing people are now talking about render times in the browsers and like API performance and speed. And I'm like, do you even know what a word API means? No, but I hear that we need to make sure that our APIs are fast, right? So those kind of conversations are actually starting to happen, which is good. But they only happened because of this whole kind of digital transformation journey that we went on, to the point of, we kept on shouting performance, 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 and quality and user experience. So now it's being repeated back to us, which is a good thing. I don't know if you're seeing something similar.
Yeah, you get that. The language is the first thing that gets adopted. The mindset, the culture, the actual depth of understanding as to what that means then follows later. So it's always a good sign when you start seeing the language getting adopted, but it is a potential cause for conflict.
Even better if they knew what the words meant.
Yeah, it would be much better if they knew what they meant, yeah.
Or if they actually pay the cost of what that means.
So how many people regularly deal with other people in the organization using words they don't quite understand? Is that a thing for everybody? Yeah.
Those are the same people who raise their hand at like the 500 plus numbers.
Here's the other question, which is a bit more uncomfortable, right? How many people actually use words that they don't understand? Like when you're trying to deal with marketing and you're talking about personas, yeah? Right, okay.
I work for a telco. I still have no clue what some of the telco terms are.
Okay, so, but this change and this kind of digital transformation, putting the user first, that was what set the stage for Node to really kind of come up, right? And that was like, this is the amazing thing to me, right? Okay? I mean, JavaScript, like JavaScript won? Like really? Like I would not have predicted this 10, 15 years ago, like 20 years ago. JavaScript would not have been top of the list.
No, everybody goes in, well, historically, in the organizations I've worked in the UI and previous, it's, you go and learn Java or .NET first, right? It's where you kind of cut your teeth, and nobody would have expected that. I don't think anyone was expecting that at all. But as the web became dominant, and therefore the functional language in the browser becomes dominant, then and as that's migrated to the server side, then it's become the most important language.
Yeah, I think I disagree with that. I don't think I used to be the one to say, oh, of course, the browser, and that's why. And I think what I've learned recently is seeing how different teams that are not even software teams are starting to build things and do things with JavaScript, which enable their part of the business. Like, I just heard a story recently about a business development team in a big company that started building applications and APIs, and now they need help, and how do they scale it? But they were only able to do that because of JavaScript, and the reason JavaScript is the choice is because it's the path of least resistance. It's easy to adopt, it's easy to learn. There's infinite amount of resources online to learn it from scratch. There's no cost for an IDE that you have to license to download. There's no certification cost for you to become a junior developer, having paid a lot of training and a lot of cost for learning the thing. Yeah. You can just go and do it.
Yeah, and that is, like, it's changing everything, right? And it's changing big things. I mean, this is the kind of evidence behind it, right? The node.js downloads. We all know these ones, right? I'm not going to dwell on this, right? Okay? And, okay, so it's really easy for a company like NearForm to love open source, right? It kind of enabled what we did. It's absolutely brilliant. And for a lot of enterprise, it's easy as well. They kind of get 97% of what they need, through like the module ecosystem. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So it's easy for us to say we love open source. But Microsoft love open source? Like, and they haven't even extended it yet. They're actually genuinely embracing open source in a whole new way, which is fantastic to see. It's a real, I mean, if you look at some of the people that spoke during the week, the kind of, the examples you're given, the investment in the community, they're actually properly embracing open source. And there's other big names as well, you'll see them around. IBM obviously have been doing this for a very, very long time, and they're very open source centric. And then we have, one of the bigger names in open source, Red Hat. Everybody associates Red Hat with open source, right? And this week, we found out something new, right? So, and this is a bigger shift than it seems. I mean, this coming together of these two organizations is a tectonic shift in the industry. For IBM to put out their CEO, putting open source front and center is an incredible thing to see. So I suppose, is it also fair to talk about like this, Ahmad?
Yeah, I think we're probably a small, tiny example in the context of the IBM example, but I think every company nowadays, whether they like it or not, whether they chose to or not, they rely on open source. Their entire business is operating on top of some open source ecosystem, and they inevitably have to invest back in the open source, whether they like it or not. And from our perspective, we're a telco. Like, at the end of the day, we're selling phones and selling internet connections, right? This is how they think of the business. Yeah. But as you and I probably think, as software developers and technologists, is that it's never really about the data or the cellular connection. It's about the customer experience. It's about the application quality. It's about the service quality, and all these things that we expect in a modern digital world. And open source is definitely part of that equation. If you are going to be successful in building the most modern application for your customers and your experiences, then open source is where it's at. If you want to be successful in building the most performant things, open source. If you're going to be successful in lowering your costs and attracting the right talent into your business, again, open source. Like there is no competitor in that kind of way of thinking as far as the open source world from adoption and contribution perspective.
So we've got tech companies, and then we've got like what I would call traditional brands, right? So Telco, it's 100 years old, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But then we've got like accounting and audit firms.
Yeah. Yeah, an accounting firm, an audit firm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for what we've kind of talked, when we put the customer first, then yeah, we love open source. That allows us to do what we do and change that dynamic with the customer and have a much more dynamic team working with our client and putting the customer at the center. It does give us some challenges as well. I think we have a requirement in our organization that when we're working with clients that we have independence. So we have to look at, what relationships are we forming when we're using different technologies and go through that process of getting approval to use it.
Because it's not difficult enough.
Yeah.
Without those kind of restrictions, absolutely.
So we get a different level of pain in using that technology.
Like thinking about what you've achieved with the program to build some digital products to kind of automate some of the stuff and deliver some of the services for EY. How much of that was achievable without open source? Or would you have been able to manage? Like what would have been the difference? Would it have been time? Would it have been cost? Like what's the?
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference there is there probably is commercial alternatives to lots of different parts of the stack, but then you have the procurement process that you've got to go through to then buy all those components. The one thing, I mean, we have different service lines. I work in advisory. When we have our audit business, then what that means is we are signing off the accounts of those firms. When you become the auditor on record, that becomes what we call Channel 1. I'm sure you didn't all need to know this, but the thing that means is we've been so successful in that part of the business that it creates these restrictions. So the reality is, even if there is like valid commercial licensed software to do a lot of that stuff, we might not be able to use it depending on whether we have an audit relationship with those organizations or there's additional restrictions on the use of it. So open source solves some of that problem for us, and it also allows us to then act quickly in actually setting up the team, because when the team hits the ground, you can't have them waiting for procurement to happen either.
And this is one of the biggest changes of digital transformation for me, because for years, the software industry has been about turning coders into working bees, pushing us as far away into the basement, away from the understanding of the business as possible. And the new world is all about connecting us with and understanding the business requirement. You're not implementing a feature set anymore. You're implementing a business. You're solving a business problem. As a developer, as an architect, as a designer, as somebody who knows DevOps, that's what it's all about. So,
yeah, we might not even know what all the problems are that we're about to solve as well when we're working on innovative systems. So, pre-selecting your entire tech stack before you're actually into it, that's a bit of an anti-pattern as well. So we want to kind of learn stuff as we go and then select technologies that fit.
So, and unbelievably, finally, it's actually cool to be a developer. Like, companies love developers now. It's a great time to be a developer, right? And you're...
It's also a challenging time to be a developer. If you're a developer in today's industry, that means you always have to be on top of your game and keeping up with all the changes. And sure, maybe the employers are coming after you and just throwing piles of money at you, but at the same time, that there's a little bit of that. If you're not equipped with the right mental models to deal with the level of stress that you might get from the constant change and the rapid change of how things evolve and how things change, it's definitely cool, but it's also comes with its own level of stress.
And we should really, talk about this, the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Those buzzwords. How many people know the English meaning of the word agile?
Oh, there's one hand.
One hand. Oh, that's brilliant. Okay. Well, actually, because agile is one of those words, and this coming together, and this is one of the things that makes it difficult to be a dev. And there's, and companies are really, really trying. We work with a heap of different companies to do this, right? So the most recent example is a group called the Ambassador Theatre Group. They're based all over the world, actually. They have theatres in Manhattan. They have theatres in London in the West End. And they're doing this digital transformation now, and they're doing an incredible job as they go, right? But that's one of the key things is that it's not just about trying to get, talented developers in the door and having a group around them that understand. They have to teach everybody in the business, They have to make sure that, the people who are driving everything understand that agile doesn't mean that you can change the requirement 15 minutes before you go live and everything's going to be good, because we're agile, right? So there's a lot of education, I think, and a lot of words.
Yeah, I mean, everything we just talked about up to this point is leading up to, like how do you scale a team of, hundreds of developers and hundreds of products while things are changing, while the industry is evolving, while things around you are changing. I remember a few weeks ago, I was in the middle of, CI/CD kind of evolution of our tooling, and then I happened to be at GitHub Universe, and then they announced GitHub Actions. I'm like, okay, well, now we have to go back to the drawing board. There's opportunities everywhere. It doesn't mean we always have to do them. It doesn't mean you always have to change. But for the business side of things, that's the scary part. Talking about doing things in Agile and learning as you go makes sense for us in software. But for the business side of things, that's scary. It's like, what do you mean? You've made a decision a month ago, now you're changing. We can't have that. We've got to make sure that you're doing the right thing.
And that's the other thing. It takes months to become expert at anything, right? And now we live in a world where everything is changing every 4.5 minutes. When you go in and you go in to advise companies as the ultimate expert, how difficult is that when everything is changing all the time?
It causes, quite a few challenges. I mean, the thing with every client engagement's different, so there's different maturity levels. These are the kind of things we have to consider when we're starting working with those organizations. For us, though, we have this impedance mismatch between what we can do with software and technology. And I think the first thing that we find is that technology's been blamed for a lot of things historically. It always used to be, it was like the network was down, and then it was like, who's managing the server, all those kind of things.
IT can't deliver.
IT can't deliver. These things are like truisms for many organizations. They're taken as fact. And when you go in and you've got like a highly performant team who work in an agile way, you're acting with like a lean startup principle behind you, they still think technology is going to be the thing that's going to get in the way of actually delivering a project success. And you're saying, it's not anymore. Trust us. So once you get over that initial trust, you then realize it's like all the other stuff that you don't have that doesn't work agile. So if you're needing to change a team or reshape a team in terms of enabling what the new platform, or you're going through a digital transformation, you might be introducing a new technology platform, a digital platform into the business. Where are the people that know how to use it and work with it? That takes time. That doesn't happen at the same rate of change as which we can now deliver software. So the actual problems are moving into different parts of the engagement, and that's what's...
Well, if you turbocharge the engine, you have to make modifications to the rest of the car.
The rest of the car.
The engine just goes out through the front of the car, which is some of the things we're seeing. So, let's get first. This is one of the differences, right? So well, it's really, really easy, right? So I don't know, I heard Michael earlier on, Michael Dawson, he was talking about fail fast, right? Okay. But failing fast and failing publicly are two very different things, especially when you're an enterprise with a brand that has value and you have to respect that. And also, breaking things is not really acceptable. Can't be done.
I think the failing fast thing has been used in lots of different contexts. For me, I translate that as, well, fail fast is, let's discover what hypothesis around our new product design or product model or business model doesn't work, and let's learn from that. So kind of the other side of that same coin is, always be learning and learn as quickly as you can. It's not the focus is failure. The focus is on learning what doesn't work in the context that I'm in. And then this whole thing about moving fast and breaking things like the kind of Facebook when it started out, that really isn't much of an option for us. I think the kind of Facebook evolved to kind of move fast and have stable infrastructure. And I think that's, as it matured as an organization, became a lot bigger because it was a scale problem. They found that the refactoring wasn't allowing them to move fast. So they would move very fast and change things, but they would break, and the time that was spent actually refactoring and dealing with technical debt meant that it was actually slowing them down. So we need to move fast with stable infrastructure. We also need to be able to move fast and be true to our brand, and also be true to doing the right thing for the customer. So I think that's the context that we work.
And moving fast is something that's it's all about, right? That's what it's all about. But then there's the whole dichotomy of like fast versus secure and safe, and that's a big one, isn't it? And that's the
Yeah, I mean, take the telco example. You can move fast and break things perhaps before you get to production, but once you're in production, there are people's bills, privacy, personal information. We're also in the healthcare kind of systems industry. So, in Canada, we actually operate a lot of the federal level healthcare systems. I'm not going to move fast and break things there because that means potentially exposing all the Canadian healthcare data. That's not just unthinkable. It's also, everybody will be in a lawsuit and we'll all be fired forever. Like that's not going to work. But there has to be a balance between, how do you experiment? How do you have a culture of experimentation? How do you have a cultural shift in the way the organization thinks about making things on a small scale change as opposed to big scale change? That way you can actually move fast and avoid breaking things.
Yeah, and also I think we have to move, like one of the big things is maturity of understanding what security looks like in the new world, right? So, if you talk about the old way of doing security, Gordon, I mean, and versus how it should be done, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, for us, that's another part of our organization that's having to go through this change. We have a traditional enterprise IT organization, but we're now forming a client technology division. So recognizing that when it comes to delivering client technology, not just for the consumption of consultants delivering projects, there's a different paradigm in place. And every single aspect from infrastructure, security, development operations, all these things are massively changing. It's not one of the things that can actually be compromised, though. It's always the thing that is really important to have in place and to be trusted, because that's part of protecting our brand and what our offer is to our clients.
I think that's the big thing that we just need to understand, that the old safety blankets where, you had your vendors and they did releases and they certified that their stuff was secure. That was good. And I had this lovely, as an IT director or whatever, I had this lovely safety blanket and I could feel lovely and warm and fuzzy and everything was going to be good. And now you kind of describe, we had a bit of fun, myself and Matteo, at a conference a while ago. He built a hello world, right? So I don't know, how many lines of JavaScript? I don't know if Matteo's here. It's about, 7 lines of JavaScript. And then he pulled in a linter, test framework, web framework, and not too much, right? So, and a logger. And I think we pulled in 1.4 million lines of JavaScript. There was 6,832 modules pulled in that dependency tree. And you kind of expose it to people, and that warm, fuzzy feeling disappears really fast. How do you control that? Yeah. Like, how do you make that secure, and how do you move fast? And it's a very, it's an interesting world. But there is a lot of, a lot of the vendors certifying this is secure. That didn't make things secure. No. That was a very thin safety blanket. That wasn't real security. And I think it's nice, but I think that the understanding that the responsibility to put things in place is now at the company, not somewhere over there with some third party. That's number one in getting it right. And
yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, like the development practices themselves are evolving within the company. The developers are more, exposed to higher level things, and I think it's a byproduct of our industry and the ecosystem that we're in. Like just thinking of the past 5 years of Node.js alone, the ecosystem way more than quadrupled, at least in size. So yeah, to your point, all these libraries and systems out there.
Oh, it's insane. The numbers are mad. Like 10 million developers, 800,000 modules, 455 new modules a day. It's like it's a paradise for the security scaremongers, but it's not. I think we have to learn to deal with it. And those 800,000 modules come with other problems, right? So
yeah.
Well, maybe Gordon here, this is this big thing about quality indicators. How do you choose which one?
Well, yeah, there's not many indicators at the moment, isn't there? There's popularity indicators, I think, on packages, like how many people use it and how often it's been starred on GitHub and things like that. I think the next level down is then like who is behind each of those packages. So you're looking at, it's not just been used, but like is it being used by other respected organizations. But these are leading indicators rather than real security indicators or real quality indicators. So I think there's an opportunity there
honestly,
to actually
like that's the like everybody is using it. Look at the big download modules, and look at like the incredible brands that are using them, and like some of them are really poor quality. Like they're just you know they shouldn't be up there. They were up there because they were in early, and they're you know they just you know we won't name any names, but you know.
I mean, I'll self-shame myself. Like, it's hard. There is no answer. Like I'll tell you right now, I have a package that's downloaded at least 5 million times a week that nobody should ever be using, but it's in all your laptops and your servers and everything now, because it's a dependency of a dependency in request, and request is a dependency of NPM. So it's actually packaged with NPM every time we download NPM. So here you go. And it's something that's completely irrelevant to NPM. It's completely irrelevant to your daily lives, but it's deployed in your servers right now. Why? It's just from a dependency kind of architecture design and the way our dependency management works, fine, that kind of makes sense. But to your point, like if you look at who uses like this particular package, it's probably every company in the world. That doesn't mean it's useful for everybody. That doesn't mean it's of quality. And I know it's not because I wrote it, so it's not that great. But yeah, it's a hard challenge.
So, you know, we've covered most of this off. It's always nice just to get everybody just to relax a bit after you've been talking about like stress and security and that. I just deliberately did this because this is Ahmed's dog.
I try to make a point of injecting my dog to everything I do.
Yeah.
So this is my dog. Her name is Ruby, not because of the programming language. We are the node.conf after all. But I thought this picture was on theme because it includes the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, obviously, because Ruby is great and she's a good dog. The bad is that winter is coming. And the ugly is that she loves winter. I'm going to have to clean her after every walk. There you go.
But that, I suppose, really is just to give us a little bit of a warm, fuzzy feeling before we talk about kind of one of the bigger problems, and that's the sustainability. Like we're growing up as a community of developers, and there's a couple of big changes happening around that. So if you go back a few years and you look at JavaScript as an ecosystem, the contributors, the maintainers, and the users, they're all the same people, right? So if you have a big dependency tree and you've got, you know, you want to move from, say, a lot of folks are looking at moving from node 6 to node 8 at the moment, right? And you've got a problem down here somewhere in the tree. You've got to get something ready so it can be moved forward and migrated. You just drop down and change it, right? Because everybody is operating at a very, very deep level, and they're very aware of how everything hangs together. And you know, as we get more and more people in here, there are people using JavaScript that don't know a whole lot about that aren't really comfortable enough to drop down and fix a deep dependency, that wouldn't really be able to understand the context, and they'd probably break loads of other things, right? So we have this, and then you look at that in the context of a simple hello world, 1.3 million lines of JavaScript, 6,800 modules. In there, you have a dependency on some piece of open source with only a few maintainers, right? And you know, it's really, really bad is when developers get to know each other, right? So you have 3 maintainers, right? But like 2 of them are married to each other, and they're just about to have a baby, and that's a disaster for that module, right? It's the end of the road, and there's no quality indicator that will tell you that. That can be like one of the most downloaded modules. It can be high quality. You can look at it with all the security tools, and it's rock solid. And it's just going to stop for a few years until they, you know, get back to normal sleeping patterns and everything else that happens. You know, so I think we need to look at sustainability a different way and create the link, right? And that's, you know, and you touched on this earlier, Ahmad, right? Which is 97% of an average enterprise pulls in from open source, you know, the code that they use, but it's not for free.
No, I mean, it's taken for granted the amount of work that's being, or the amount of money that's actually saved for enterprises by adopting open source work. And I think it's a moral obligation and a professional obligation and a professional responsibility for all of us to actually do not only contribute back on our own time, but make sure that our businesses are aware of the value we're gaining and push them to allow us to contribute more of our working time back to the open source community. Whether it's something as simple as a a typo in a README or a bug fix or improving a kind of a quality of a module or a performance of a module, it's a professional responsibility on all of us to do that, right? And that's what I'm trying to drive as well as part of the enterprise feedback conversation of how do we enable individuals like you to actually have the right tools and the conversations with your businesses so that they can enable more of that behavior.
Exactly, and also it needs to be built into the governance models, isn't it, Gordon? Like, so when you're talking about like, are developers allowed? Checking the open source. We have a lot of clients where that would be a problem.
Yeah, it's one of the things that you can maybe check the top level packages that are being contributed into what you're building, but how can you do that recursively? It's not even possible right now to do that.
And the big thing is just finding and kind of building the sustainable links. So you've got companies taking responsibility and making the changes, and that's the people who are developers, right? That's us, that's our role in it, right? And then at the kind of higher level, you need people who understand that 97% isn't for free, and they need to say, it's okay for you to spend some of your time that I'm paying you, there we go, contribute back to this open source and make it happen. But this is a really, really big problem because there's companies now up here with these big dependencies. Like if you look at TELUS, massive part of digital transformation is adopting Node, React.
Yeah,
like that stack is there.
Basically, it's at the core of it. And without Node, we won't be able to do any of our digital transformation efforts.
A lot of the newer platforms coming out of EY.
Yep.
They're going to be,
It's the same stack, yeah.
It's the same stack. And I know that, the user feedback group is looking at this as a major issue this year. And I know that some of the other folks are going to be putting it front and center. But I think we have to make sure we look at this and make sure we understand that the companies that use are not the same as the companies maintain and contribute anymore. And we need to now help build that link so it's sustainable and help. And there's loads of different ways. Like if you look at Citibank, they kind of do it with whitelists of modules you can use because we know they're going to be kept up and we can manage that. But we need to find a proper, sustainable way of doing this in the ecosystem. That's probably the biggest ugly thing about Node left, I think. So, thank you very, very much, everybody, for listening to us.